Well, good evening. Welcome to the July 14th edition of Sports on Sunset. I'm your host, James Jericho. This is my good friend, Reggie Jr. He's sitting in for Jeremy Paul this week. Jeremy is going to be off telling jokes in the Northwest, Seattle and Portland. And, well, we know, hopefully, that in Portland they won't try to confuse him with any of the Trailblazers. Yeah, there is, in fact, one additional black person now in Portland. To be ready for yourselves over in Oregon. Reggie has just gotten back from Arizona. He was part of the NBC Stand Up for Diversity auditions. My man did fantastically. And on top of that, he's going to be headlining First Friday Funnies on August 3rd out in Garden Grove. Pardon the shameless plug. But he's actually good. I'm looking forward to having him. Now, the topic that we are going to wind up discussing this week is the immediate future for college football. The Southeastern Conference has had a stranglehold on the national championship game now for 6 years. Your last national conference national champion that was not from the SEC came back when Vince Young led the Texas Longhorns over the USC Trojans out in the Rose Bowl. 6 entire years, nothing but SEC, 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 including an all-SEC final game. Look, at some point, this crap has to end. I'm not saying it's the worst conference in football or anything like that, but come on, in my opinion, there's no way that this conference is that damn good. On the other hand, my friend here is a big SEC fan, so I want to start off, for those of us on the West Coast, and for those of us who are who are fans of these other major conferences, the Big 12, what was the Big 10, etc., why, in your opinion, is the SEC that strong? And do you believe, for example, that it deserves to be in the national conference game every year for the last 6 years?
Well, I don't think you can deserve anything that you worked for. I mean, that you cannot deserve it. I think that the SEC has dominated football the traditional way through speed, power, scheme-wise. I think it's the best conference for a reason. It's not a popularity contest. I mean, it's not like we're judging a pageant. The SEC just so happens to be, kicking butt and taking names. And, I live in Big 12 country, so I'm a huge fan of Big 12 football. I'm a huge, or the old Big 8, KU, K-State, Iowa State, Nebraska, Colorado, Missouri, those guys. But I lived in Atlanta for a while, and I see a different brand of athlete that's being bred in those southeastern states, which is why it is also the recruiting hotbed of the nation as well.
Okay, so now let me kick the tires on what you just said for a moment there. You said it's not a popularity contest, but on some level it is, because the BCS rankings are an amalgamation of a variety of polls. And the heavier ones, I would argue, include the ones that involve the sports writers and the coaches, or at least the sports writers vote in. Yeah, well, but you have to look at the strength of schedule in the SEC is a lot tougher than any other conference. And how do you know? Well, because you can look at the top 25 consistently. You can look at the level of play conference-wise in the Big 12 and also the Pac-10 as well, with the exception. I think what a lot of people are miffed at is you're putting a regional tint on everything. Or it's the SEC. Well, it's college football, so that, people on the West Coast feel like that they're not being represented in these games and things of that nature. But it has nothing to do with that. It's just that the teams are tougher, the schedule's tougher, and it's just a better brand of football. Let me paint. Look, I'm not saying that it sucks. I'm not necessarily sure I'm sold with the idea of diversification in offense. I do know that that certain schools, for example, LSU, have had strong line play. My problem is that, for one, the SEC is the conference that could try to convince everybody that Jamarcus Russell could play professional football. Same for Tim Tebow. So I'm not necessarily sure we're talking about a dynamic offensive conference here. I realize, now don't get me wrong, I like defense too. But the other thing I would say is maybe there is some regional fun at play here. For example, we look at the sports writer poll again, okay? Concentrate so much press coverage on the East Coast. There's not a dominant football conference in the Northeast, but there is a dominant conference in the Southeast. Everything basically south of Washington, D.C. Is it possible that you have so many writers focusing on the Southeast, and then you got the rest of the country splitting up the poll and basically splitting the vote between the Pac-10, the Big 12, and do you see where I'm going?
I disagree, because when USC was dominating out here in the West Coast, all you would hear about is how great Pac-10 football is, how great USC is when they had their run. So, as Ric Flair said,
side note, what is your problem? I'm not saying you hate it, but what is your problem with, say, USC or the Pac-10, Pac-12?
I honestly, now I don't have as big of an issue with the Pac-12.
What was your issue then?
Because it was USC's conference. There wasn't a conference at that time. It was USC kicking everybody's butt up and down the West Coast. Oregon hadn't come to their own yet. UCLA, they dominated every year. So there really wasn't another team, at least in the SEC. You have Alabama, you have LSU, you have South Carolina coming up now. When Cam Newton was at Auburn, they beasted all the years that Florida was there. So was kicking butt as well. So you had other teams in the conference that could beat you on any given Saturday. So.
I will easily concede Cam Newton. Even though he's only played 1 year in the NFL, I don't have an issue with what you said about Cam Newton, but my thinking, look, here's the reason Jeremy and I debated the new BCS playoff, okay? I have a problem when a whole group of people anoint something. I think the reason that we're all happy, most of us are happy that there is a playoff now, is that you have to earn it. My problem is that it was like a rubber stamp. Whoever won the SEC conference game, and by the way, that conference title game last year in the SEC was a dog crap 4-hour. That wasn't really fantastic defense. That was inept offense. I'm sorry. 3 field goals.
Well, it was conservative. I mean, what you have to understand is that in the SEC, one play can beat you. I mean, the defenses are usually pretty even with in regard to the top tier teams in the conference. Okay, now LSU, I don't feel like, you know, in the national title game that it was a conservative game. Both teams didn't want to make a mistake, so they played conservative football. Now,
who's your favorite in the SEC now, by the way?
I'm still picking Alabama to probably win it, but I think South Carolina has a good opportunity this year too, with Jadeveon Clowney coming off the edge. You have Lattimore coming out of the backfield. So I think they have the best balance in the SEC. But my issue with people on the West Coast is this: if you're tired of the SEC winning everything, then beat them.
But the problem is that if you don't get a chance, if they're not accepting, like for example, one of the reasons I like USC is USC will not be afraid. They will travel across the country. They will play whoever wants to play them.
The only team in the Pac-10 that I see playing SEC team is Cal playing Tennessee. And Tennessee
I am suggesting there are teams afraid to play USC non-conference. I'm very much suggesting that.
To me, is we can talk all day about how people are sick of the SEC, but no one's beating them. So and USC has a good opportunity this year because they'll be ranked #1 coming into the season.
That is correct.
So if they make it through the Pac-10 and if they can beat Oregon, then they can play whoever's in the SEC.
By the way, we want to throw some stuff in about college football before the season starts. Just to let you know, USC for the most part is considered people's preseason #1. 2 of the 4 major sports networks, Fox and CBS, is predicting that a Pac-10 team will reach the championship game, and that most people are under the impression that they're actually going to wind up playing LSU. LSU is, well, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Other storylines regarding the SEC, Auburn is probably out of the picture in the sense that they lost a 1,000-yard back from last year. Michael Dyer went to Arkansas State out of falling out with the coach. Alabama, not as big a loss, but their quarterback, they had a quarterback that was demoted from the starting lineup, and he left for Virginia. I don't think that's necessary. I forget the kid's name. I was scribbling too quickly. Here's the reason I think LSU is probably the reason. I'm a big fan of line play, and they have 3 defensive linemen that, in theory, could go in the first round of the NFL.
So does South Carolina, man. I mean, Jadeveon Clowney. I think he had a kid named Gilmore coming off the edge.
Who do you see, by the way, who do you see as a non-SEC team that can sneak its way in? I've got 2.
I mean,
I've got 2 surprise teams.
This is my thing. With regard to that, Texas, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame should be in the top 5 because they won't have as tough of a road to get to the national championship. So if I can pick a team outside of the SEC, I've always liked Oregon. I've always liked Oregon's style of play. They've always been a fast team out there, play fast out here on the West Coast. They've been USC's Achilles heel for a number of years. So I go with Oregon and I go with Texas.
I agree on Texas. I think that Texas is going to be a surprise. I like their defense.
The quarterback play has been horrible, which is what's kept.
That is exactly where I was going.
Mm-hmm.
The other team that I see as a surprise, I don't see Oregon. I don't see Ohio State because I think Ohio State has got too much. They got to learn first with Urban Meyer before they can play what Urban Meyer wants to play. The other team that I see being the big surprise, Michigan. I love the way that Brady Hoke coaches. I love Denard Robinson. I don't think their defense is as great as LSU, for example, but I really like the way that Brady Hoke does things. I think he's an incredible.
I don't think Michigan can beat USC, Oregon. I don't think they can hang with South Carolina.
Right, but what I will say is this: if you're Michigan and you can run the table against if they could, I think they can.
They're going to lose to Michigan State this year, and they're going to lose. They're going to find a way to lose Ohio State. I guarantee you. If I was a betting man, I'm telling you they're going to lose Ohio State.
One final point before we break off of this topic. The reason I will say this. After this season, there's going to be a playoff in the BCS. With that said, if you're talking about, you're saying you will definitely have an SEC team mixed in, maybe 2, and you'll have. But the thing for the SEC teams, they will have to defeat 2 teams to win the national title in the top 4. If SEC teams can do that, I will be more than willing to cede more points in the argument that we've just had. Because winning 1 game, anybody can win 1 game. Winning 2 teams of the top 4 teams of the nation, you deserve your title.
Who else is gonna? See, this is my problem. People complaining all about the SEC, but no one else is stepping up and beating SEC teams.
Because SEC teams are not scheduling that strong out of the conference.
Well, the teams that are out of conference, there's no out of conference teams. Tell USC to put 2 SEC teams on the schedule. I'm not talking about
Lane Kiffin would love that.
Lane Kiffin's a bitch. Lane Kiffin he won't come back to the SEC because they'll lynch him in Tennessee. That's the first thing. The second thing is there's no other team in the nation, not your Michigans, not your Ohio States, not your Texases, not your USCs that are beating these teams. The Pac team had an opportunity to beat Auburn, the national championship team game, and they folded. So to me, it's as plain as simple as that. The SEC is just, and it's okay to just say someone is better right now. I don't think to say that the SEC is the best conference in football is not to say
for 6 entire years.
The proof's in the pudding.
I'm saying.
Who else is beating them? They're playing the game.
A combination of a pack of sports writers over on the East Coast all lining up behind SEC automatically vault insulting
sports writers can't win games. Sports writers can't win games.
If they're the ones that are
sports writers, they can't win games.
What I'm telling you,
this is what I'm telling you. If you're in a major conference, if you're in a major conference like the Pac-12, like the Big 12, like the Big 10, and you run your conference, which USC has not done in the past 5 years.
This is not an argument on USC.
I'm not saying it, but I'm saying it. So like Texas, if Texas runs the Big 12, they're in the national championship game. If Michigan runs the Big 10, they're in the national championship game. So if you win your conference, which they should win out, those teams should win out, then you're in the national championship game.
Do you agree with the thesis that a late season loss should harm your chances of going into the national title game?
See, I don't think it's
because that should have doomed Alabama.
Look. So I'm not saying that only thing a late season loss does is it puts you further back. Now,
but it didn't put them back at all. They were in the national title game.
Right, but the team they were going to end up playing, which I think it was Alabama was going to end up playing, was Oklahoma State.
Yeah, man.
Oklahoma State did not deserve to be on the same practice field with Alabama. Now we can say, well, we got to see. No, they were going to get annihilated. They barely beat Stanford. They were going to get annihilated.
Stanford was a lot stronger of a football team than you're giving them credit.
I'm not saying that Stanford isn't a good football team. But what I am saying is, if you're saying that Oklahoma State deserves to be in the same national championship with the Alabama team, with the Alabama team that has Trent Richardson on there, that has Dante Hightower on the defense. I mean, these are loaded programs. So I don't think we're giving enough credit to the SEC team that won the year that Tim Tebow won those 2 national championships. Their defenses were stacked. They had Rainey, they had Percy Harvin, they had Hernandez, who's now with the New England Patriots. So I don't think we're giving the SEC teams enough credit to say those teams are loaded. It's not just we're just voting for the SEC teams because they're SEC teams. The writers are voting because they're just right now they're better. And it's not to say that the Pac-10 isn't a good conference. I don't think to say that the SEC is the best conference.
I'm not arguing about whether the Pac-10 is better than the SEC.
Right, but
I'm saying that the rest of the country you can't tell me that the number 2 team in the SEC was better than every other conference champion.
Who were they not better than? Who was well, I may tend to agree with you because I don't think LSU was that great of a like. I don't think they should.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't think LSU, especially with their quarterback play. But what I am saying, LSU would have still beat Oklahoma State. They still would have beat Oklahoma State, and they still would have beat Stanford. Because Stanford doesn't have any speed. SEC is predicated on speed, man. Speed kills. Which is why everybody recruits down there. Because you can take a 3-star athlete in Florida, and he's starting at Connecticut at Rutgers. You see what I'm saying? So
we so need to switch topics so we can talk about the other stuff first. Reggie, why don't you tell them what's on your mind? Take a few moments here.
On which topic?
Any topic on your mind, brother.
All right, so I want to take some time to talk about Jerry Sandusky statue being taken down at Penn State. You know, my thing is this. Joe Paterno left a great legacy, right? He left a great legacy prior to the whole child molestation thing. And if we're gonna make allowances to say, well, Joe Paterno, should be given some leeway, they should keep his statue up, then we have to give allowances to every other person that commits a crime or is an accessory to a crime like child molestation. I think his statue should come down. You can leave his name up on whatever buildings that are already there, but I mean, if you're 70 years old, man, come on, you got to step up and take a leadership role and protect little kids. Jerry Sandusky was running programs and basically luring little inner city kids out the Happy Valley to have a not so happy time. So Penn State, it's going to take a while for you all to wash this off your resume, maybe never, but hey, maybe you guys can get in the national championship game and everybody will forgive me. Kobe raped a chick and nobody remembers that. I mean, winning cures a lot. That's all I'm saying.
You damn right.
Winning cures all.
Well, that's why I still have my Lakers flag hanging out. I don't. What? Denver? I ain't never heard of it. I don't know nothing about no women in Denver. Guys, I want to talk for a moment about Caltech athletics. Caltech was reprimanded and penalized for fielding players who were declared academically ineligible by the NCAA. 30 ineligible players in 12 sports. They've placed themselves on 3 years of probation. They have vacated all of those massive Caltech wins, those massive winning streaks. The banners have been taken down. No campus recruiting. Look. If you go to if you go to some colleges, you're not supposed to be going to class. If you go to Caltech, what the fuck are you doing playing sports in the first place? I'm serious. Who gives a shit? If you're Caltech, this is the most non-penalty penalty I have ever heard in my fucking life. Caltech had a 310-game, 26-year conference losing streak that ended in 2011. Seriously, no campus recruiting? What a penalty to Caltech that is. There's just no hooking up with all of those Caltech hottie-ass co-eds, you know? Oh, Penelope, the way the oil on your skin glistens in the moonlight when you read Principles of Quantum Physics. It's so freaking hot in here. I mean, you can't now you can't go to the Caltech Hooters for the free beer. You know, you're just gonna, all the Caltech recruits, they're just gonna have to roadie down to Comic-Con with a bottle of hand lotion like the rest of us. It's just that way. I mean, clearly Caltech had something to hide. Yeah. You know? I mean, they must have. Dad, I know if I cut class, my doctorate in chemical engineering will be in jeopardy, but Coach says I have the most accurate bounce pass on the backdoor cut for a winless Division III team he has ever seen. Dad, let me cut this class. I've got a path to the show. Look, I honestly think they should give Caltech the death penalty. Why not? I mean, if you think about it, we already know why their Caltech is losing everything. If you have too many white boys on your basketball team, you are going to have a massive ass losing streak. Just ask the Los Angeles Lakers of last year. Josh McRoberts. Anyway, guys, that has been an energetic edition of Sports on Sunset. We want to thank you very much for joining us. Once again, I'm James Jericho.
Reggie Jr.
We'll see you soon.